Yo, Keon, you are on. Today you're doing math because you are not half ready to add because you are rad. It's time to get an A because that's what I say. No, because I'm a teacher. All right, so the rules do not change. So you guys just told me that if I give you a number, 3, and I tell you to square it, what do? You do 3 times 3 to get 9. Which is the square, which is the root? 9 is the square, and 3 is the root. Everybody's cool with that, yeah? Right? Okay. So fraction decimals are just numbers, aren't they? So the rules still apply. What is if I gave you 1/2 and I told you to square it? What would you do? Multiply it by itself. So what is 1/2 times 1/2? 1/4. Which is the square, which is the root? The square equals 1/4. I'm going to pretend I'm not hearing music because that would mean I would have to take away everybody's phones and headphones because I can't see who it is, so I would punish everyone. I'm going to pretend that you don't have an earphone in when I'm teaching when I told you that's incredibly rude. Do you see me with earphones in when you are asking me questions? No. Do you know why? Because I'm giving you my undivided attention. Everybody cool? Does it matter what the fraction looks like? Of course not. If I gave you 9/4 and I told you to square it, what would you do? Square it. You would do 9/4 times 9/4 and you would get 81/16. Right? Everybody's got this, yeah? Okay, decimals are no different. If I gave you 1.2 and told you to square it, what would you do? Oh, crap, 1.2 is the example I gave you right here. What would you do? Multiply it by itself, 1.2 times 1.2, and you would get 1.44. Now, remember, obviously, your calculator is going to come into play on decimals, isn't it? Right? So, what happens here? Please look. What number has a square root of 5/8? If 5/8 is the root, then what do I do to get the square? TJ. Multiply it by itself. So 5/8 times 5/8, which gets me what? 25/64. Everybody got it? Now, I've already shown you 1.2. Duh. You know it's 1.44. So let's do a second one. What if I told you to do 0.6 is the root? So what do? TJ? Multiply it by itself. You're probably going to go to your calculator to do 0.6 times 0.6 to get 0.36. But you don't need to go to your calculator, do you? Because you know that 6 times 6 is 36, and you add 2 decimal places, right? So you need 2 decimal places in the answer, so you can put the point right there. Everybody cool? The rules don't change. So 3/8 is 3 times 3 and 8 times 8 to get what? 9/64, which means 3/8 is the root and the square is 9/64. What about this one? Three halves times 3 halves, which is 3 times 3 over 2 times 2, which is 9/4. So 3 halves is the square root of 9/4. Everybody good? What about this one? Can you do that in your head? Sure you can. What's 5 times 5? 25. And how many decimals are in the question? 1, 2. So how many decimals do you need in the answer? 2. 1, 2. 0.25. So 0.5 is the square root of 0.25. Right? Now this one you're probably not going to be able to do in your head. So what do you do if you can't do the math in your head? Calculator, and what is it? 6.25. Is everybody good with the easy ones? Good. All right. Let's move on to something a little bit more tricky. Identify fractions that are a perfect square. Well, you guys are smart kids, right? What have you noticed about this and this fraction? Did they both have square roots? Yeah, they did, because this was 3 halves and this was 3/8. What do you notice about all fractions? How many parts does a fraction have? 2. What are they called? The denominator is down here. The denominator. And the numerator is up here. What do you notice about, in these two fractions, what do you notice about the numerator and the denominator? Kyle? Have you seen those numbers, 9 and 64 and 9 and 4, at some point today? Where? Have you seen 9 and 64 at some point today? They're squares, aren't they? So, what does that tell us about a fraction that's a perfect square? What must it have? You guys need to be able to do some synthesis of knowledge. Fractions have a numerator and a denominator. These two fractions have square roots. What about these two fractions makes them perfect squares? Helena. I couldn't hear you because somebody's yelling in the hall. I'm sorry. Through dividing? Is that what you were going to say? Okay, you're close. Nobody is making the connection between this chart that you just filled out that has 9 and 64 on it and this number, which has 9 and 64. Why? 9 has a square root of 3 and... Right. So a perfect square means the numerator and the denominator must both be squares. Now, where do you find that list of squares? How do you know if your numbers are squares? TJ? Yeah, but how do you know that? Do you have everyone memorized? No, so where do you need to go? You can use your calculator if they're big numbers, or you can look on your chart that you just filled out, yes? So, is 16 over 25 a perfect square? Well, let's check. If it is a perfect square, then there has to be a square root of 16 and a square root of 25. Is there a square root of 16? If you don't know it, you either check with your calculator or you look on the chart that you just filled out. Is there a square root of 16? What is it? 4. So now we check the bottom one. Is there a square root of 25? What is it? 5. So that has a square root. Why? Because 4 over 5 times 4 over 5 gets me 16 over 25. Now let's check 9 and 20. 9, 20. Does 9 have a square root? 3. Does 20? No. So this guy is not a square. So 9 and 49. Is 9 a perfect square? Yes or no? It is. Why? What makes 9 a perfect square? Right, because 3 times 3, a number times itself. 49, yes or no? Yes. Why? 7 times 7. So if 9 is a square and 49 is a square, is their fraction a square? Yes, it is. Got it? All right, well, let's look at 25. Is 25? Yes, it is. Why? 5 times 5. 13? Isn't. Why? No root. So 25 over 13 isn't. What about 64 and 81? 64 is. Why? 8 times 8. 81 is, because 9 times 9. So when they're together, it is. Now work the other way. 9 over 4 is 3 times 3 and 2 times 2. So what's the square root? 3 over 2. What about 16 and 81? Does 16 have a square root? Yes. What is it? 4. 4 and 4. Does 81? 9 and 9. So it's 4 over 9. So now you guys are experts at whole number squares, yes? You're experts at fraction squares, yeah? So what's the only other way we count? Decimals. But let's think about this for a second. Aren't decimals just numbers and fractions written a different way? So if you know numbers and fractions, can you do decimals? Can you? Sure you can. Let's have a look at this. Stop for a second. That's a decimal, yeah? We don't know how to deal with decimals, do we? But we know how to deal with fractions, right? I need to split you 4 up. I got 2 desks right here. Do you need to move? Then pull your head out of your rear and do math. Okay? because I got 2 desks right there and the next desk is out there. If you don't want to be here, don't come. Okay? Because I got 18 other kids to teach. Some of them couldn't care less. They're just sitting there. But you're bugging another kid who may want to care. And yes, maybe other kids are bugging you too, but you're the only one I'm catching. Kind of like when the cop pulls over one speeder on a highway. Okay? So fix it. This decimal is what? Can I make that decimal a fraction? Sure I can. Because it's 1 and 69 over 100, yes? Now how would I turn that into an improper fraction? Times plus, right? What's 100 times 1? Plus 69 is 169 over 100, yes? Is 100 a perfect square? Yeah. What is the square root of 100? 10. Is 169? I don't know. It's not on my chart, is it? So what do I have to do? Is it on the chart? No. So where do I go to find the square root of 169? Your calculator. And what is it? It is 13. So 13 over 10. You guys are smart kids. What math is that? No. Divide. What's 13 divided by 10? 1.3. So the square root of that is 1.3.
I got 1.3, but it's more difficult, right?
Now, put that in your brain and hold it there for a minute. 3.5 is 3 5/10, yes? Okay. How do I make that a fraction? Times plus. What is it? 35 over 10. Is 35 a square root? Or does 35 have a square root? It's not on our chart, so it doesn't. Does 10? No. So this guy is not a perfect square. Now I want you guys to look at something. Remember, I've told you, if it happens once in math, it always happens, yes? Right? How many decimal places? 1. So that means this is always going to be a fraction over 10, isn't it? Does 10 have a square root?
No.
No. So does a 1 decimal ever have a square root? No. Can't. Can it? Because it's always over 10, isn't it? So 1 decimal is never a square. Now, is 2 decimals? Do you think it always is? No. 2 decimals maybe. Because 2 decimals is over 100, yes? And 100 has a perfect square. Now you guys are smart kids. Yes, you are. And I'm tired of you doing that gag every time I tell you you're a smart kid. If you want, I can call you an idiot.
Okay.
Does that work better? Is that what you want to feel? Then why would you make that gag every time I say you're a smart kid? Because it's not funny. You guys now have all the information to answer the question I'm about to ask you. What if there's 3 decimals? Is it never or maybe?
Maybe.
And what if it's 4 decimals? Is it never or maybe? Look at your first 2 that you've already proven. Does the never share any characteristics with 3 or 4? Three decimal places would be 0.123, wouldn't it? So when there's one decimal, we were over 10. When there's two decimals, we were over 100. What's three decimals? Over 1,000. Does 1,000 make a square? Really? No, that's 10,000. Does 1,000 make a square? 50 times 50 is 2,500. 10 times 10 is 100. 25 times 25 is 625. No, it doesn't, does it? So 3 decimals is a never. What about 4 decimals? 4 is a maybe. Because it's 10,000. So what is it about the number of decimal places that tells you if it's possible or never? If there's 1, it's a never. If there's 3, it's a never. What about 5? Never. What about 6? Maybe. Why? What is it that gives you the hint? What's the pattern, Ethan? What do 1, 3, 5 all share? Marcus? They're odd numbers. An odd number of decimal places can't ever have a square. And even might. Everybody got it? Picking up what I'm putting down? Reading my mail, mowing my lawn? So if I gave you this crazy number, 17.24, is that a possible? Why? Because it's even. What if I gave you this? 4.9. No. Even though it looks like it, right? Because 49 has a square root of 7.
Well, that's the point.
49 has an even number of decimal places, doesn't it? 0. And 0 is an even number, isn't it? This has 1, so it can't be, even though it looks like it. Everybody understand? Okay. Grab your books.